Okay, so how many of you here are involved in neuroscience? Anyone? Oh, goody. So when I get really lost in the language, you're going to help me out, right? That would be great.
Well, I think we're all involved in it,
some way or another. We're trying to figure out the darn brain. So I'm excited about the brain, and it's become a very pedestrian passion of mine in the work that I do in leadership and with people, and particularly the differences between men and women, which I'm not going to speak to much today at all, but I am here to tell you we're the lucky ones when it comes to the wiring of our brains in terms of our gender. We are the lucky ones because we have more neural circuitry than men do, and that explains a lot. Okay, so one of the people I admire is a Tibetan Buddhist, and his name is Alan Wallace. And he kind of put a little story out there that I'm going to share with you to start. Imagine that you were walking down the street, and it's raining. It's Victoria, and it's November. And you've got a bag full of groceries, and you're exhausted. And you're walking along to your way home. And all of a sudden, as you stop at the corner for a light, someone just roughly bumps into you, and down you go to the sidewalk. And your groceries are spilled, you're sprawled, the oranges are rolling away, the tomato juice is spilled, the eggs are broken. And you are like thinking to yourself, what the heck? What just happened to me, you idiot that just bumped into me? Are you blind or what the heck? What? And as you kind of catch your breath and you look around, you realize that the person that bumped into you is actually blind. And you pause. And something takes over. All of a sudden you're not angry. You feel sympathy. And you say to this person, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Are you okay? Can I help you up? In our everyday, this situation happens in one way or another to us. Someone bumps into us. We're offended. We're angry. We're annoyed. Or whatever. But the reality often is that, gosh, the source of this disharmony and sometimes this angst that we go through is not by intent by others. It's often not even blindness or ignorance. And once we realize that, we can actually open up our hearts and we can open up to wisdom and compassion. And so I want to speak about that today. I want to open the door a little bit more about compassion and bring a greater awareness to this idea of the consciousness and the science behind the power of compassion. So I'm going to explore three things today. The first is the idea of the science, because I'm really excited about the science of the brain. And it's around our ability to use our brain to evolve the capacity and capability to actually have and be more compassionate. And the second thing that I want to speak to is to consider the impact that compassionate leadership can have in our workplaces and in the world. And third, to experience a simple meditation following Angela's meditation. I want to do a little meditation with you today because meditation is a proven method of creating powerful neurological pathways to compassion. So we're going to do that today. So how do we define compassion? Well, you just have to Google it and oh my God, there's 100 different ways. But I like this one. It's from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and it states that compassion is a sympathetic consciousness of others' distress, together with a desire to alleviate it. So I would put it simply that it's not just sympathy or kindness, but rather empathy with action. So, how simple then is it to create compassion? Well, it's not so simple. Can we train ourselves? Yes, absolutely, we can train ourselves to be more compassionate. And we can actually model it and help others learn how to be compassionate. The most recent studies that I've been diving into in neuroscience confirm that you can train your brain to be more compassionate with a little practice and a whole lot of mindful intention. And according to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, cultivating compassion through meditation significantly affects the brain region that makes a person more empathetic, and particularly more empathetic to other people's struggles. So through an experiment that they did with a group of longtime meditation practitioners, the researchers revealed that positive emotions, such as loving kindness and compassion, can be evolved in the same way as playing a musical instrument or becoming proficient in a sport. So when you think about that, there's hope, isn't there? And Richard Davidson, founder and chair of the Center for Investigating Minds, Healthy Minds, and one of the scientists involved in this work, he states that alterations in the brain function when they were doing this project were observed after just a total of 7 hours of training. So it didn't take a lot of time. In other words, this is a learned skill, one we are able to hone and acquire proficiency in, if we do it enough, if we practice it enough. So I'm so intrigued by that because I've also been witnessing in my work that there are a lot of heavy hitters in business bringing this idea to the forefront that compassion needs to be practiced and actually included in our daily lives and woven into our workplaces. And I've done some work recently with Lloyd Dean. He's the CEO of a San Francisco-based healthcare system, one of the largest in the western part of the US. And also with Arianna Huffington of AOL. And they, along with many others, have become real vocal advocates for bringing meditation, mindfulness, and compassion to the forefront of business. I think that's incredibly cool. I've worked for a lot of people in my day that weren't all that compassionate and scared the bejesus out of me, actually. And so I'm thinking, my gosh, imagine how wonderful that would be. Now, Stanford's University, they have a Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education, and those of you who are in this field may have actually worked with them. And they are really on the forefront. They're also the catalyst for the official Week of Compassion, which is coming up this year from November 10th to 16th, where scientists, educators, and business leaders from around the world are going to conference in San Francisco solely on this topic. And I'm happy to report that one of the partners is the University of British Columbia. The earliest research about the compassionate brain revealed that through brain cells known as mirror neurons, most of us will actually feel the emotions, the intentions, and the movements of other people. And you know this. And you only have to be around a baby or a small child to see how those mirror neurons work. They compel us to ease their suffering. Who has not been compelled to go help a mother with a crying baby? Who has not had, if you've ever had a baby and been nursing, had your breast milk just go eep when you hear a baby, even when it's not your baby? And so we have these the cellular structure to actually evoke sympathy. And conversely, babies or small children will mirror the sounds and actions we make. They'll get quiet if we get quiet. They smile when we smile. And so we know this in our everyday lives. We know that there's something connective here between us, and that is part of our cellular structure called mirror neurons. Now, smart marketers and journalists learned long ago that depicting tragedy in the form of a story about the masses in desperate situations did not prompt or enlist the same response as when they narrowed the plight to only one individual. And so we often see just a picture of one child's face on our television, or we hear one personal story with someone less fortunate than ourselves, and it triggers those mirror neurons, and we're compelled to write a check, we're compelled to volunteer, to do something to alleviate the suffering. You're going to have to just imagine these pink circles of mine are brain cells. Within the brain cells is something called neurons. And what happens is with every thought, action, feeling, word, thing you do, communication happens between these neurons. And it goes like this. So you talk, you say what you say, you do what you do, and you learn some things. And as you learn some things, the neuron pathway, called a synapsis, continues to get thicker and deeper and more constant. So what are the first colors you learned when you were a little child? Primary colors. What are the things that you use every day? You don't have to think about your bed, your desk, your ottoman, right? And so what happens is as we go through life, some of our neuron pathways are hardwired. We're about 40%, 30 to 40% of our hardwiring happens actually at birth for emotions, cognitive capability, etc. But as our lives, expand and grow, we begin to create new pathways. But it takes effort because it's really so much easier to go to what we know. It's so much easier to go to red, yellow, blue, green. It's so much easier to go to Pegasus, the flying horse. Bravo for shooting it out of the cannon. I've even had a horse on an airplane. I've even had one of the guys drew a big engine with wings. Horsepower? Yeah, I know, it had to be a guy. So the thing that I'm wanting to have you really understand here today is that we have what I call brain ruts. And we get stuck in our brain ruts. And it's not serving us. It's not serving our emotional well-being. It's not serving our leadership. It's not serving our lives. Because we don't take the effort to create something new. And this is important as we get into learning about how to rewire our brain to be more compassionate. So, thank you for participating. You were great. And I'm so glad to see that Victoria has innovative thinkers. So, what happened, here is not uncommon. This happens whenever I do this work. And I always think, well, where did the color aqua and fuchsia go? Right? We love those colors. Where are they? But they're not readily available or accessible. And even though this was a sort of a somewhat imposed, stressful situation, it reflects what happens when we are dealing with stress in our everyday. We respond on autopilot. How many of you experience what we call a gut reaction? Women are actually more hardwired in this regard. Well, there's a reason you have a gut reaction, because the same neuron cellular structure that you have here, you also have here. You have it in your stomach, your solar plexus, your esophagus, your intestines. And it's called the enteric nervous system. And it actually has the ability to communicate from here to here and here to here. And so there's a lot more information that we are being told than we often pay attention to. Many of us will ignore our gut and try to figure out a really hardwired kind of reason for something, a decision perhaps. But really, it's revealing information that perhaps is not coming through what we would call your head brain. So pay attention to where and what brain is telling you information. And also be aware, because if as leaders we always go to what we know and we get caught in our own brain ruts, we're not necessarily making really good decisions. We're not making good decisions as parents or business partners or employees. And for many years, we thought at a certain age that our brains were done. You know, about 21, in fact, we thought the brains were done. They were cooked. Hardwiring was finished, development was over. But of course, the new science tells us that's not true at all, that in fact our brains evolve and can change all through our lives, but it will take effort. So this is really important as we get into this idea about compassion, because if the brain's neural circuitry is malleable, which it is, and it can be rewired through neuroplasticity, then our ability to become more compassionate is never fixed. We get to evolve it. Now, as humans, compassion is natural and intuitive. However, we often can't see the need for compassion, and often we don't see it for ourselves or for others. And the starting point to understanding all of this is being compassionate to yourself. And that's tricky. How do we do that? From my own experience, my compassion for myself quotient really grew when, in the midst of a thriving career, I became increasingly exhausted and somewhat depressed. And I'd taken a call from a close associate one day in the quiet of my boardroom, and I was actually laying down on the floor. Nobody could see me. The door was closed, there was no windows. But I'd gone in there because I was just so tired. And I thought, well, I can take this call from Scott lying down, which I did. And in this conversation, I revealed to him that I wasn't coping very well. Work felt futile, the days were long. I was thinking about my own death through the night, I wasn't sleeping. So I shared all of this with him, and he was intently listening and very empathetic. And then he asked me a profound question. He said, how do you think your worldview is affecting the work and the decisions you're making and those around you? And I thought, oh my God, in that very instant, I knew that my frame of mind was having devastating effects on those around me, those I cared about. And I thought of the individuals in my life, those that were counting on me to give direction or counsel or love, and they all came flooding to my mind. And I realized I could not possibly be living my best work or doing my best in my marriage in the state I was living in. So he urged me to call my doctor that very afternoon, and he said to me, and when you call, you need to tell them everything, and you need to call me by 5 o'clock and tell me that you've done that. And so of course I did, and he didn't leave me there though. He kept checking in on me week after week after week. And he wanted to know how I was doing, and he continued this empathetic move. But it was compassion, because it was empathy with action. He didn't just tell me to go off and do something, he actually kept coming back. And it was my own sympathetic response to alleviate the suffering that I was causing for those around me that gave me the courage to act. And it was my own mirror neurons actually kicking in for those other people. So this experience evolved my own awareness regarding the power of compassion, and it really impacted my leadership. It didn't happen overnight, of course, but in fact, every day still is kind of a mindful and intentional practice for me. But I began to really monitor my sleep health and meditate and take time to reflect and all those good things. But I also began to be able to really quickly, intuitively recognize when those around me at work were suffering, even the slightest of discomfort or pain or unease or burnout or whatever you want to call it. And as the leader, I felt completely responsible for the actions taken to relieve whatever suffering they might be experiencing. So my own ability to be a compassionate leader, of course, is a work in progress. And I know, however, that I created a culture of compassion as a result of my own awareness. And that, of course, we know is key. And the latest research suggests that a more compassionate workplace where helpfulness and forgiveness is part of the norm, is very much more productive and more efficient, and of course a lot happier. They're also claiming that in businesses where compassion is emphasized, employees are less stressed. So there's just more ease, and they're more satisfied with their jobs. They're creating, of course, lower turnover, there's more engagement, there's just all this positive stuff that impacts the bottom line. So I feel really fortunate that I had that experience, because I can attest to this firsthand, that as I grew the compassion quotient in the workplace, we all grew the bottom line. So foundational to this whole notion is our own awareness. And we must be more compassionate with our own selves, train our own brains, otherwise it's nearly impossible to feel empathy for another, let alone act upon it. And here's the tricky thing. Because, it's kind of an Achilles heel really, because here we are in our beautiful British Columbia, living a beautiful life. And it's kind of our own good fortune, that is our Achilles heel, to really leading and living compassionately. For the lap of luxury often makes us complacent to the plight of others. And when you're in an agreeable and comfortable situation, it is far more difficult to empathize with another person's suffering. Those mirror neurons are not kicking in. So this could be one of the reasons, very possibly, why many leaders are completely out of touch with what their employees are experiencing. They're not ever really standing in the shoes of the other. And there's a disconnect. And it also speaks to the disconnect in our society between the haves and the have-nots. I watched recently on public television a fantastic series on the iconic Roosevelt family in America, and I was reminded of this importance of standing in another's shoes in the story of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. Because there was a day when Eleanor, who was from a very privileged family, a young debutante, volunteered as a teacher in a settlement house in the Lower East Side of New York City. And she asked her fiancé, Franklin Roosevelt, to stop by and visit her, and he did. And then a girl became injured, and so he offered to carry her home. So he did that. And afterwards, he remarked about the sights and the sounds and the smells of this overcrowded, unsafe, unsanitary conditions that this family and this girl were living in, along with many, many others. And he was truly shocked. It just overwhelmed him that people had to live in such a way. This exposure of these living conditions began a lifelong, and really a lifelong interest in reform, social reform for both Eleanor and Franklin, to improve the lives of the impoverished. And their political platform all those years was based on that experience. And FDR's leadership and political opportunism was impacted greatly. And so it's this idea of actively seeking outside of ourselves experiences that will shift our worldview. And, bringing this forward today in our society, there are people everywhere, and you probably are some of them. I know Carolyn is one of them that I know, that are starting their own organizations with a social imperative, and who are recognizing the need, in fact, to expose children and youth in particular to those less fortunate than themselves. And this really gives me hope. Those involved in the science behind compassion at Stanford are increasingly convinced that while science and technology are moving humanity forward, the human species could be doomed if it were to fundamentally lack compassion. And no doubt you would agree. I mean, all of you have had, I'm sure, in some part, some way, been touched by someone who was compassionate to you. And I believe there's a quiet global revolution happening here, because around this idea, as a mechanism, compassion being a mechanism to actually create world peace. Now, there is a really good idea. I think it's maybe one of the best ideas the world has ever had, and it's called the Charter for Compassion. Is anyone here involved in that? Okay, good. Well, it's a document that transcends religious, ideological, and national differences. Supported by leading thinkers from around the world and from many traditions, the Charter activates the Golden Rule around the world. Do you know what the Golden Rule is? Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. So the Charter for Compassion is a cooperative effort to restore not only compassionate thinking, more importantly, compassionate action to the center of religious, moral, and political life. And compassion is the principal determination to put ourselves in the shoes of the other. And it lies at the heart, of course, of all religious and ethical systems. There are millions of people who have signed the Charter, and there are 43 cities who have declared the Charter a community promise, including Nanaimo, Parksville, and Powell River. Yay, them. And there are more than 242 organizing cities around the globe, and Victoria is one of them. Now, I don't know who's leading it. I tried to find out, but I couldn't find out. There's also an organization here called the Compassion for Life. They have a Facebook page and whatnot, but they didn't seem very active. But here's the deal, ladies. Can we help Victoria become one of the cities who make the Charter a community promise? I mean, I hope so, and I'd be happy to help. I don't live here, but I care, and I would be happy to help do that. Vancouver is also on the list, but hasn't reached its destination either. And right now, I'd like you to just put your hands in your lap, and Angela warmed us up to do a little meditation, and I'd like to do a 1-minute meditation, so I ask for 1 minute more of your time. Knowing what you've just heard, can you bring to mind this person that you just learned about? And can you be sure to first let out a sigh? Put down whatever burden you have. Take another deep breath and sigh. Yeah. We as ladies need to sigh more. Now I'd like you to take a breath and maybe count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you let this breath go, let out love and compassion. And bring to mind what you wish for this person, what you hope for this person. What ease could you bring them? Feel your love. Perhaps you can envision this person being wrapped in white and pink light. Now take a breath and let go of the words in your mind. Just follow your breath for 2 breaths. And with each breath, breathe in love and kindness for yourself. And let it go, love and kindness for others. Do it again. Feel the heart of yourself. Feel your breath. Now gently open your eyes. And you may feel quite open from this experience and full of loving kindness, or at least empty of negativity. And I just want to close by saying that, through the marvels of neuroscience, we continue to learn a lot more about the wonders of the human brain. But what you just did is the start of creating a new neural pathway, new synapses around this idea of compassion. And we know that we can literally evolve our thinking and our behaving, and of course, most importantly, our doing, simply by reshaping our neural circuitry and altering the way we as human beings interact with each other. So as leaders and as people in a vibrant community, we can commit to enabling compassion in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, in our businesses. We can model it ourselves. And thanks to what we now know, we can be optimistic that we can grow into a new way of being human. And so, like the Dalai Lama says, that compassion is our deepest nature and it arises from our interconnection with all things. We are all interconnected. My wish for you today is that every day you choose to experience the self-directed science of compassion to create a kinder humanity. Thank you for your time. Namaste.
Hola. I get to ring you.
So I just have a little.
Oh, yay. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I want to buy the book that goes with these cards. Your book, I think it is, right?
That concludes our lunch. There won't be another lunch until 2015, but there are lots of other things coming up.